I was just on my AOL mailbox, and there was an ad for Barack Obama. There's lots of ads on AOL. Join Michelle, help Obama, join Obama's team, support Michelle, blah 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 blah. And most of these make me kind of sick. They're kind of disgustingly racial and racist. And one that would just appeared on while I was looking at my AOL mail, there was this banner ad up on AOL. Said it was to click on a website, which I was about to click on it, but then it disappeared from the banner. Join African Americans for Obama. Oh yes, it said we have your back, or we have you back, or something like that. African Americans for Obama. Now, this is pretty just blatantly racist. The whole notion it's just absurd how this notion of equality and affirmative action and tokenism and affirmative action quotas, where essentially, no matter what anybody wants to say, there was a certain element of Obama's presidency that is identical to the 1970s, where the government instituted quotas in a lot of areas for there had to be a certain percentage of black people in this and a certain percentage of women in that. All these quotas. And it was called affirmative action. And it was supposed to rebalance. It was supposed to make up for the imbalances that were in our society by deliberately recalculating, resetting the balances. Deliberately and calculatingly, specifically saying there have to be a certain number of employees or people hired for this or that situation who have to be a certain race or a certain gender to address the imbalances that are perceived as being in our society. And so if there are a certain number of candidates and it comes down to a point where there's a quota and you've got one candidate who is among this protected quota demographic and another candidate who is among what is perceived as the majority demographic of usually white male, then preference would be given to the person who was not a white male to try to make up for the historical injustices where people who were not white males were often denied the opportunity to have certain positions. And it's true that discrimination existed in the past, so that those who were not white males were denied positions. And so then to make up for that, they turned it around and they said, well, to a certain degree, just to make up a certain percentage numbers, certain statistical numbers, we've got to make sure that there are quotas met. And so in those cases, a certain number of people who were just as there were a number of lawsuits always of some people who said they were better qualified for the job, but they were denied it because because of affirmative action, because somebody else who wasn't quite as well qualified but was a member of a protected demographic was given preference. And then there's the question of racism and the Martin Luther King speech, I Have a Dream, where he was saying, I will dream one day. Well, he was just saying that one day we won't be a racist society. One day everybody will be judged as an individual. And the way he said it was, a man will be judged by the content of his character and not the color of his skin. But the problem is, you have to ask yourself, well, when we're doing this affirmative action, deliberate recalculation of setting quotas, are we not judging a person? Are we not awarding positions to people based on the color of their skin rather than their qualifications? And at certain point, people would argue that, well, yes, but it was necessary on a short-term, temporary basis until the inequities were resolved in our society, and then we could drop the whole affirmative action thing and start simply judging people based on their personal qualifications, regardless of their color, regardless of their color or lack of color, whiteness or blackness, or femaleness or maleness, or whichever. And I can't. So that was the idea that for as a temporary measure, it was necessary, with the long-term goal that eventually it should become unnecessary, and we could dispense with it. So at what point do you do that? At what point do you say you're dispensing with affirmative action without having a bunch of outcry of accusations that now it's racist again? Now we don't have quotas, so now you're racist in favor of white people. And there's going to be a lot of people who are incapable of perceiving the aspect of the Obama presidency that is very much a affirmative action mentality. That, there's just too many people that voted for Obama simply because he was black, and they thought it was that electing a black president was so important to redress historical racism in our society. So that is very much along the lines of the same affirmative action attitudes of, well, as a temporary basis, a temporary measure, we need to deliberately set the balance, set the imbalance on the other side of the scale, make it weigh a little more heavily on the other side, swing the pendulum to the other direction for a little bit, just so we can finally get a decent middle ground balance going on. And if that's what you want to do, then fine. If you say, well, we need to have a black president to break the mold, to break through the pattern where people thought that it wasn't even possible for a black man ever to become elected the president of the United States. And if you feel that it's really necessary to do that deliberately to reset that imbalance, then okay, fine. Go ahead and do that, and be honest about it. Be stated openly and say, this, we believe in a short-term immediate measure, we need to have affirmative action policy towards elections, towards politics, towards the presidency of the United States. We need, for a short term, to engage in an affirmative action approach to the elections. And so vote for Obama, because to vote for Obama is to address the historical inequities of our society, and you're doing your part to reset that balance to where it ought to be if we had a truly equal society. If that's what you want to do, come out and do it, and say it, and do it openly. But don't go around sneaking around pretending, oh well, we're not racist, we're against racism, but then you end up essentially depending on racism for your whole campaign, depending on the notion that people will vote for you because of the color of your skin. If people want to vote for Obama because of the color of his skin, that is their choice to do so, but I would just like them to do so honestly, and not try to pretend that it's just something else, not to try to hide it, disguise it, and pretend that it's not racism. Come out and be racist. Vote on the issues in a manner of racism, but be honest about it, for God's sake. But if people are voting for Obama simply because he's a black person, they think that's the important issue, that's the most important issue in America, is to redress historical inequities of race in our society, then they should be able to recognize that they are, according to Martin Luther King's own definition, engaging in a racist manner, a racist attitude, where they are judging a person not by the content of his character, but by the color of his skin. So when I see this ad for African Americans for Obama, you know, suppose it was the other way around. Suppose there was banner ads popping up saying white Americans for Romney. Huh? How many people would bristle at that? How many people would take offense and say, oh my God, that's offensive, that is racist? Imagine voting for Romney on the basis of the fact that you're white and he's white, and how horribly racist is that? Well, how much less horribly blatant is it if people say, well, I'm black, I'm an African American, I'm going to vote for Obama because he's a black African American and I'm a black African American, and we have to exercise solidarity. Bro, we have to exercise solidarity with our blood brothers, yo. It's just as racist as if they had an ad that said white Americans for Romney or white Americans for Palin. People would get offended by that, and rightly so. Rightly so. They would see it as blatant racism. So why don't those same people see it as blatant racism when they have ads that say vote for Obama because he's black and you're black, and if you're black you should vote for Obama? That's bullshit. That's fucking goddamn fucking racist bullshit, and I'm sick of racist bullshit trying to pass itself off as anti-racism. And anytime somebody criticizes this hypocritical, phony anti-racism and points out its inherent racism, basically that you are judging people based on the color of their skin and not the content of their characters. So that if you come out and you even voice an objection to this, what will happen is all these phony, insincere, political correct people are going to say, oh, you're a terrible racist because you criticized our supportive mentality of being supportive of African Americans and black people, and we are the ones who are taking measures against racism when we want to support having a black president and saying vote for him because he's black. But it's the same shit, and they're the ones who accuse you of being racist for daring to criticize this. And they're the ones who are fucking racist because they're the ones who are judging people by the color of their skin or by their race or by their gender, and not by their character and their competence. And historically, 100 years from now, or 200 years from now, or maybe even 50 years from now, history books will look back and will see this as obvious. They say, oh yeah, of course, back in 2008, 2012, when America had its first black president, and they won't call them African American by then. They probably won't call them black, but they might. Then who knows what they'll call them? Maybe they'll call them darkies. Maybe they'll even go back to call them Negroes or niggers or coons or pickaninnies or a brand new word or chocolate or bloobity bloops or bibbity baps. They'll have to keep playing this game of musical chairs and keep renaming what you call people, because no matter what you call people, as long as people resent you and despise you because of your race, it's going to end up sounding derogatory eventually, sooner or later. And so you have to keep playing this game of musical chairs where you keep switching it around. You keep changing hats, because every hat you wear starts to look dirty after a couple of decades. That's why we had to stop calling black people black, start to calling them African Americans. Because even the term black, that we were told when I was a kid, oh, black is the term of respect. Black is beautiful. Black pride. Black Panthers. Everything was black is good. Black, 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 black. Then all of a sudden comes 1990. We think that we denote a tone of of nastiness and condescension when some people say the word black. They say it with a sneer. Ooh, black. So we've got to come up with a new word now. Let's call them African Americans. The farce of that being that all the politically correct people that go along with the new speak that they're told to speak, told to learn the new language, start getting in the habit of calling any black person an African American. When the fact is that not all people with dark skin are descended. Well, we're all descended from Africans eventually. So we're all descended from, since we're all descended from Africans ultimately, then we're all Americans. We're all Africans, aren't we? We can all hyphenate African with our names. I'm an African Lithuanian. I'm an African European. But no, that's not what they mean. They mean African within the last 5 centuries. And there are millions of people with dark skin whose ancestry within the last 5 centuries, or 1,000 years, or 5,000 years, or 10,000 years, has not been African ancestry. People that come from Asia, India, Australia, Indonesia, all along the route, all along the path from going out from Africa toward Australia. All along that route, there's all kinds of people who have every bit as much pigment as the average person you call African American today, and yet they're not Americans. I mean, they're not African ancestry, and a lot of them are not Americans. And so the irony, the absurdity, is that there are a lot of Americans who they could go off to another country, take a vacation to another country, and they see a black face there, and they'll address that person as an African American. Oh, I see that you're an African American. And the person might not even speak English, and the person might say, no, I'm not American, and I'm not African. I'm not African and I'm not American, so please don't call me an African American, because that's just making you look absurd and ignorant. Why should African Americans be called African Americans when white Americans are not called European Americans? When's the last time you heard somebody described as a European American? No, they're called, if anything, they're called white. And so the opposite side of that coin, white, is black. So why should we think that, oh, calling somebody black is a term of disparagement? Now you have to call them an African American. But if somebody came out and called himself a European American, you would snicker at them. And if somebody came out and said, well, vote for so and so because he's a white American, and if you're white, then you should have solidarity, people would say that's horrible racism. But if somebody says, vote for this person because they're black, and if you're black, you should have solidarity, that's all supposed to be positive and non-racist. Well, it's bullshit. It's racist. Enough on this topic so far, but you know, it comes up because here we are in my town. The first black governor of Massachusetts was elected somewhere around 2003 or something. I don't know, 2003, 2004. Then 2008, the first black president is elected, and then 2009, my town elects its first black mayor. So there we have black. It just seems too calculated. It seems too contrived that all of a sudden at once the first black people in each of these positions all happens at the same time. It's all synchronized, happening at exactly the same historical period. Seems a little bit more than mere coincidence and mere random chance. There's something deliberate and coordinated going on, where we have our first black president at the same time as our first black governor, at the same time as our first black mayor. There's something weird going on here, and I'm getting a little bit fed up with it, and I'm getting especially fed up with the fact that anybody who tries to point out that there's something weird about it is going to automatically get accused of being a horrible, white, bigoted, prejudiced racist for saying so. When all I'm talking about is the notion that racism means not judging a person by the color of their skin, but by the content and competency of their qualifications. and I see affirmative action taking place in politics, and it's a little bit weird. And it's most weird because it tries to pretend it's not happening.